probably a couple months ready for that. Doesn't matter. I could
Let's
wait till
wait.
January.
Yeah, let's wait, and we'll just take care of what we have to at our special meeting, because all of the board won't be there. I don't want them to miss anything. So we'll just take care of the vouchers at the next meeting, and then the following after that, we can take care of your report.
That'll be great. So I'll plan on that in January, having hopefully like 3 months worth of financials for us.
Okay.
That's really all that I have to report on tonight.
Okay. Any questions from the board for Mr. Reynolds? All right, thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
So we'll move on now to Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Flores, and she's going to transition from her report into the school improvement plans for us. If somebody has a microphone on in the background, could you turn it off? I'm hearing somebody's TV or something. We're going to transition from Deanna into the principals as they start their reports on their school improvement plans. So go ahead, Deanna.
Deanna, I'll put that up for you right now. Hold on one sec.
Okay.
And while she does that, Deanna,
I'm going to go ahead and
she does that. Let me just real quick. Let me remind the principals. We're going to try to limit the time. Otherwise, we'll be here for a couple of hours. If we can keep the reports around 10 minutes or so or less, and then we'll ask each board member if they have any questions as we move through them.
I think they'll be prepared for that, Scotty. We planned on making sure we were to the point. And my report, I'm going to dedicate my time to the school improvement plans and school improvement and school-wide plans. This year, we've done something different than ever before in aligning our school improvement plans in an attempt to have long-term goals. The state, not only Untitled really want to see plans that aren't just a one-year goal and move on, but something that you're working on long-term, because most improvement doesn't happen in just 1 year. So our plans this year, our elementary plans all the goals are identical. And that will be Keene Riverview, Prosser Heights, and Whitstrand. And our high school and middle school plan, they also work together, but theirs are a little bit different because they have some different academic measures, and then the high school has some additional goals. So we're going to start right now with the elementary. We do have 5-year goals written. Go ahead and go to that next slide, Deidre. Normally, we would break down these 5-year goals into yearly increments, but this is not a normal year. So this year, our focus really is overall, our goal is to maintain grade level status for students so they don't regress, so they continue to move forward. This situation with distance learning and the shutdown of the pandemic, we're monitoring our students' growth really carefully, but we are going to use those 5-year goals. So in the next 4 years, we'll be dividing our growth over 4 years. And this year, like I said, our goal is students to at least improve. So if they finished at 3rd grade level last year, we're hoping they're going to finish at the end of 4th grade this year. And these are some of the things that we're going to be working on. So we're going to start with our reading goals.
Oops. Okay, do you see me now? Okay. So I'm Chris Moore, the principal of Keene Riverview, and I'm presenting for all the K-5 elementary schools for reading. So as Deanna shared, this is a very different approach than what you've heard of in the past. But one positive opportunity that has come out of this COVID epidemic is the collaboration of K-5. It's the strongest it's ever been in the district. Starting last March, the principals and the coaches had our staffs work in grade level bands, regardless of what school they went to, so that kids had common instruction in their grade level standards. Singular grade band focus is continuing this year, especially when we're working around professional development, our coaches PLC time, and also on our online programs that we're using at each of our schools. So it makes sense to continue the systematic focus when we're working on our SIP goals. So in the reading goal is, as it states there, 75% of all 3rd graders will read at grade level by the spring of 2025, as measured by the Iready scores. So first of all, I want to explain a little bit about Iready Assessment in reading. It is an assessment that's given 3 times a year in our district. It measures or assesses and measures kids in 6 component areas. The component areas are phonological awareness, which is being able to hear the sounds in a word. It's like apple, I hear 2 sounds. Phonics, which is hearing the small units of sound, which are the letters, such as cat. I hear 3 different sounds for 3 different letters. They're able to be measured in high frequency words, vocabulary, and then comprehension in both informational and in literature. This is not the only assessment that we give in school. We also give formative assessments throughout the school year. We give DRA, which this year we have just, we've been using RAS Plus and then using it, correlating it to the DRA. We give Fontaine in between the blocks of time that we give Iready to be able to monitor student growth. The last complete year that we had students take the Iready test was fall of last year. In fall of 2019, all K-5 students took the Iready reading test, K-5. In that year, 213 students out of 1,138, which is 19% of our students, were on grade level at the beginning of the year in reading. Now they grow during the year. In a normal year, they grow. But at the beginning of last year, only 19% were on grade level. Now, by the end of the year, that's much higher. The accuracy of this year's virtual data is kind of questionable. Number one, because students, not all took the test, and also the amount of support they're given at home when given the test. But this year, out of 807 students that took the test K-5, 223 of them, which is 27%, were on or above grade level. So remembering the focus in K2 is learning how to read, and in 3.5, reading to learn, the areas of greatest need are being reflected as we focus on the priority standards. So for instance, on first grade, with the absence of a complete year, our first grade students are really struggling in phonemic awareness and phonics. 70% of them are not at grade level in first grade this year. So we are focusing on the priority standards around those foundational skills in our class meetings and small group work. In 3rd through 5th grade, vocabulary is a huge weakness this year based on the Iready skills. 49% of those students are below grade level, 1 to 2 grade levels below, which creates a huge challenge for them to be able to comprehend both in literature and in informational. So in order to address those, and that's also that also is reflected in our ELL population. It's very hard to read if you are reading and writing if you don't have your speaking and listening first, if you have a very strong foundation in that. So the steps we're taking to achieve this goal in the next 5 years has already started. It's not a year that we haven't started this goal. On December 3rd, the K-5 met and we began the evaluation and determination if changes are needed to existing K-5 programs. So the first step was to gather all the information on what programs are the buildings using, what are their instructional and intervention times look like, and what kind of assessments are used at every school. And we've compiled that list that we could share with you. The second piece of that is now starting, which is the evaluation of the existing programs. Now that we have the list, we need to evaluate them for implementation and the effectiveness of them. For instance, one program, Words Their Way, is a program we use for phonological awareness and phonics. It's also one that's high quality phonics program that the Dyslexia Foundation had on their list. But are we using it to the fullest that it's being able to use? And then the third activity or goal that we're going to use is designing, based on all this information that will be accumulated, designing a district-wide system to address the teaching of reading. What does core look like in K-5? What do the interventions look like systematically so that we can provide them when students are of need? That's the reading goal. Questions?
Board members, do you have any questions for Chris on the reading goal? All right, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
All right, so I think we're going to move on to Jody next. Is that correct, Deanna?
Yep, it is. I
Okay.
can tell you.
Yes,
All right.
All right. Okay, so I've got the reading goal, and I just want to tell you that this has been really fun for me because I am a middle school ELA teacher for 16 years. And so I am learning math. So our goal is also 75% of all fifth graders will perform at the grade level in math by the spring of 2025, measured by Iready. So at this point, when you're looking at the Iready data, as a district, what I was noticing is that we really struggle with the geometry and algebraic thinking. And so just with when I was looking at Heights and Whitstrand, because of that 3-5, we are at 70%, both schools are at 70% in geometry of students not on grade level. And then with algebraic thinking, Heights was still at 70%, not on grade level, and Whitstrand was at 60%, in the 60%. So we have some work to do. What we are doing is that we're working with Wilma Kozai monthly. She's giving us 3 through 5 training, and she's meeting with each grade level monthly and going through that. She's also meeting with, she's meeting K5, but she's meeting K5, focusing on my 3-5. But we're also really digging into those priority standards. She's helping us dig into the priority standards and problem solving routines and practices. And so the teachers themselves have really also looked at their pacing charts to make sure that throughout this year, we are hitting all of our priority standards. And I know for me, one of my colleagues that I have worked with, he really did focus on those priority standards and fractions in particular. And he taught 3rd grade fractions in particular. And his kids by the end of the year for 2 years in a row were scoring in the 80% percentile on the SBA because he was very purposeful in working on those priority standards. So I'm confident our scores can go up because of that. We also are still having all the pull-out programs for the math interventions and doing some small groups. So those are our big things that we're working on. I just lost my train of thought there. But so yeah, that's where we're at. I know I'm missing something on my notes and I can't find them, but is there any questions? That was kind of nitty gritty.
Okay. Board members, you have any questions for Jody
Nope.
on our math goals? All right. Thank you, Jody. We'll move on to Kevin, English language learners.
Good evening. So before I start on the ELL goals, I just want to thank everybody for their work that they're putting into this. And I also want to say that it's very exciting to me to be working with the other 2 principals on common goals, common curriculum and professional development. Not only that, but using Iready, and I'm not saying Iready is perfect. I don't know of one single program that is perfect, but at least that we have data that we can start having conversations around different topics and concepts across the district and across the 3 elementaries. So that data has really driven these goals and the conversations that we're having. With the ELL students, 70% of them who qualify will exit EL services by the end of 5th grade in 2025. And actually, I believe that the ELPA test is going away and will be transitioning to WIDA this year, which is one of the tests that WIDA recommends is the LOS test, and we've been using the LOS test with our bilingual students over the last 2 or 3 years. So we have a basic understanding of what that test is, and we'll be able to, I feel like we'll be able to at least administer it fairly easy. Our EL goal is to implement regular vocabulary routines during instruction to support language acquisition. What we're finding though, as we research this, is that vocabulary is not going to, and you heard from Chris that the domains in Iready, there are 6 domains. with the phonological awareness, phonics, high frequency words, vocabulary, comprehension, and literature and informational. So what we're finding, what research is telling us, is that the vocabulary, this focus on vocabulary, is not only going to help our ELL students, it's going to help all students. Some of the data that supports this: in 2018-19, we had a limited population actually doing Iready in reading. Math had already started, but reading hadn't quite gone implemented fully across all the buildings. Vocabulary was the lowest domain on the Iready diagnostic that year. 69% of students were below grade level. In the fall of 2019 to 2020, vocabulary was the lowest domain at 2 elementary schools and the second lowest at the 3rd elementary school. And that in the fall, there were 77% of students were below grade level. Winter of 2019-2020, vocabulary was the lowest domain at all 3 elementary schools, and 77% of the students were below grade level. This last fall, like Chris had mentioned, some of the results have been altered. Well, I wouldn't say altered, but inconsistent, because we don't know how much support students, especially the younger students, received from parents at home. But vocabulary was the lowest domain at 2 elementary schools and tied for second lowest at the 3rd elementary school. Currently, 71% of students are below grade level or well below grade level. Some quotes around the vocabulary and the research that we're doing. And these quotes were provided by Jennifer Calgill, who's doing our PD, which I'll get to in a second. It is difficult, if not impossible, to separate vocabulary and comprehension. And this comes from the National Reading Panel of 2000. Vocabulary knowledge directly relates to reading comprehension. Another quote: kindergarten students' word knowledge predicts reading comprehension in 2nd grade and again in 4th grade. First grade students' vocabulary predicts their reading comprehension in the 11th grade, and that was reported in blended vocabulary. The last quote here: a large oral vocabulary helps children as they begin learning to read. Students with larger vocabularies tend to become better readers, enjoy reading more, and read independently with more frequency than students with smaller vocabulary, who struggle as readers and dislike reading. And that also comes from blended vocabulary. And that's what we're kind of seeing through the research, is that vocabulary is directly tied to the comprehension. And that's part of the reason why we're focused on vocabulary. We feel that if we have better vocabulary routines, better understanding of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 vocabulary words, and better ways to implement those vocabulary words, it will eventually increase comprehension. Like I said before, we've been working with Jennifer Calgill. She had her first, we're meeting with her 4 times this year, sorry. We just had her in December. We'll have her again January 22nd. And then in February 19th, she's going to be focused. She focused on vocabulary routines, the last PD. She'll be focusing on vocabulary routines again in January. And then we'll be switching to language function, compare and contrast in February. During that training, the 3 questions that were asked and then discussed were: which words do we pick, when do we teach them, and how do we teach them? And so through that PD, teachers learn different routines, and more importantly, academic language and how the tiers, how vocabulary words fall into different tiers. So tier 1 being conversational, tier 3 being more content specific, so maybe vocabulary specific to chemistry, and then tier 2 words are the words that you're going to see students are more likely to see in text, and to content, but also in text in general. And so it's these large tier 2 words that we're kind of trying to focus on with some of those vocabulary routines. The 2 routines that were presented The first one was 7 Steps of Pre-Teaching Vocabulary by Dr. Margarita Calderon. It's an easy way to implement vocabulary on a consistent basis. The teachers seem to be very excited about it. It's something that they can implement immediately. The second one is Marzano's 6 Steps to Effective Vocabulary Instruction. This one's a little bit more deeper. This is when you take vocabulary words for a whole unit, and you might have 6 or 10 of those, and you basically study those words and dig deeper into those vocabulary words. We're also continuing our work with Karen Beeman with the biliteracy work. She just presented digging deeper into the bridge. If you remember, a couple of years ago, we presented the maps to you. Just to update you a little bit on that, we're moving from the maps to creating units of study. The bridge is a major portion of those units. It includes 3 parts, some analysis, and then also a contrast analysis and some transition. And the whole point of the bridge is that it's intentionally planned, and you're studying one language. Say, for example, our kindergartners are really immersed in Spanish, and they're comparing it and contrasting it to English. And the goal is really to transfer from one language to another. And that's all I have for vocabulary. Any questions?
Kevin, well, just so I understand, you're talking about, all of you kind of talked about collaboration K-5. So the word list that you're talking about that you worked with Jennifer, that's a K-5 word list then that you guys are trying to come up with.
Yeah, and we actually haven't identified the word list per unit yet. This was the initial training. And so the training was getting people familiar, or teachers familiar and staff familiar with tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 words. And the defining of those, and then examples of words that would fit in those different tiers.
Okay. Board members, any questions for Mr. Gilman? Okay, thank you, sir.
You can go ahead and go on to the next slide.
So Deanna, are we moving on to
questions?
Okay.
Next is middle school. And Michael will be presenting, and Michael and Brian are kind of doing a little bit of a dog and pony show. I did find one error in the ELL slide that Michael will correct. I sent it the corrected version for Deidre, but it was easier for her to use this one, so he'll correct it when we get to it. So I think we're starting right now with Michael.
And I believe Scotty was talking directly to me, so I will try to keep it short tonight, Scotty. So ours, we broke them up. So I'll be discussing the reading goal and our ELL goal, as Deanna had indicated. We've done the same as the elementary and the secondary level by creating a 5-year goal. For the middle school in the area of reading, we've set a goal of 75% of all 8th grade students will read at standard by the spring of 2025 as measured by the Smarter Balanced Assessment interim blocks. We've used the Iready Assessment as well. We've been looking at the assessment or the Smarter Balanced Assessment through the interim blocks. It's a little more targeted to the specific areas that we're working on. Maybe it's a unit. We can look at the unit as a pre and a post assessment, measure growth that way at a much smaller level than just the 3 times a year. Much like the elementary, we did do the Iready Assessment this year. And we did, the last one we did was last winter, just before Christmas break. And so we didn't finish out the end of the year assessment. And then this fall, much like what I believe Chris talked about, we had a mix of success of getting that completed on time before the window closed. And there's also a couple of indicators in there, whether a student rushed or maybe skipped around. So the results were limited to be able to look at it for this year. So we've started talking about looking at the Smarter Balanced Assessment interim blocks just to be more focused and more targeted, and working on questions and situations much more like the students will see at the end of the year comprehensive Smarter Balanced Assessment. So our reading goals, the activities that we've set for those for this year, at the middle school, we've been working on new English language arts instructional units. We implemented those just before school started. They were created by Wilma Kozai, and she's been leading the PD in that area. We've been implementing those in the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th grades. that's for both reading and writing. And so we've just completed the first full set of units, and we're working on the second set. And the first set were pretty similar across the grade levels. So we had a lot of great collaboration between the grade levels, and now it's kind of split out a little bit in the work that they're doing. So a little bit more grade specific work. In order to move over to the Smarter Balanced Assessment interim blocks, we're going to have to do some professional development in the administration and scoring of those blocks, and how to use the data to inform our instruction. And that will be part of number 3, where we look at the PLC work, look at student work to inform instruction. And so that will be the formative assessments through the classroom. That will be the interim assessment blocks. It will be the data that we get from Iready, and the summative unit assessments that are common across all of our classes. That's one thing our teachers have really been working on this year, is creating those common assessments. So you may not leave one room and hear a teacher start a sentence and walk into another room and hear the other teacher finish that sentence, but their alignment and the work that they're doing is much more aligned than it's ever been. So they're able to look at student data on a regular basis. The high school's goal is 80% 11th graders will achieve the high school graduation cut score in ELA, English Language Arts, by the spring of 2025 on the Smarter Balanced Assessment. And so a little bit different, they're looking at that graduation cut score on their 11th graders. And so the activities you'll see there are some of them that are highlighted. Those are where we're paralleling our work between the middle school and the high school. So they too will work on professional development and Smarter Balanced Assessment interim blocks and the PLC work. And then they'll continue to use their work to revise the curriculum they have to make sure they're hitting those priority standards. And those are the standards that, there's always maybe more that we hit in a year that, helps provide a nice, well-rounded education for our students. But maybe there's a few things that we can get away with not hitting this year because we'll circle back to it next year. So I'm working on those priority standards to make sure we're getting the information and the materials that are absolutely critical to have each year, that are the building blocks for the following year. So when you look at those 2 goals, one for the middle school and one for the high school, and the activities that are behind those, that is our reading work for this year. And we've got a big bite to work on this year. There's, that's going from 41.3% and 67% for the middle school and the high school respectively to our goal in 5 years. A challenge, but we're looking forward to that challenge.
Michael, I have a question for you. It's the high school graduation cut score and the second block there. Is that a new standard that are we moving the goal there to a different standard, Brian or Michael? Or is that what we've been using?
I can speak to that one. So when you see scores reported to the OSPI report card, those scores are based upon the high school graduation cut score, which change year to year. So when we're evaluating students, you're not evaluating students on the same standard every single year. It depends on how many students score proficient, and that cut score changes depending on how well the kids are doing in that particular year. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to go with that, because it is being reported, and you'll see the same thing with reading and with math, because those are scores that are representative of our school on the school's report card. We wanted to use the same language, and that's why we chose to go with that one. So it is not new, it's just how we're referencing it. I wanted to put the same language into it this year, so that we were referencing the same thing that OSPI is referencing on the report card.
Perfect, thank you. Any questions for Michael before we move on to Brian from the board? All right, thank you, Michael. Brian, I think you're next.
Yeah, and I already started to reference this. Almost all of the principals, I hope, have given you a picture of what's happening administratively across the district. We are all very excited about the amount of collaboration that is taking place between buildings, and not just horizontally. The elementary schools have the opportunity to work with the same grade level in horizontal alignment. Michael and I, as well as the elementary schools, have the opportunity to work in a vertical alignment. which I hope you can see, and I hope as a parent in the language that we're using, such as math practices, such as priority standards. I don't want to take away from Iready in any way as I present this, but between Michael and I and the secondary goals in changing and moving away from Iready Assessment, that doesn't mean that we're not using it this year. We're just looking at trying to use the same language that kids will be using and seeing on the Smarter Balanced assessment at the end of the year, which is what we're graded upon. And so that's one of the reasons that we're moving in this direction. We feel that the Iready assessment, though it provides us with valuable information, the platform itself is more geared toward elementary level students. And so that's why we're moving toward the interim block. But in terms of the math goals, you can see there the middle school has a goal of 70% of all 8th grade students will be at grade level in math by the spring of 2025. We're going to have to break those down yearly within our buildings and in our action plans to try and close this gap. You can see in 2018-19, the middle school had a proficiency score of 34.3%. So to go from 34.3% to 70%, and then for the high school to go from 32.9% up to a 75% can seem a little bit daunting. So we're going to have to really break that down and shoot for smaller scores and smaller incremental parts to reach that standard by 2025. And our math goals, again, they're similar to the ELA. You'll see the highlighted. Those are the areas that we share. Those are the commonalities. We have a little bit of a difference in math goals because we're using 2 different programs for math. Middle school uses illustrative math and the high school uses Agile Minds. So for the middle school, numbers 1 and 2 on their activities are centered around that illustrative math piece. Number 1, that the staff will use the curriculum adaptation packs to address unfinished or missed learning. And number 2, they'll use the section guides to mitigate issues around distance learning and pacing. And that said, that's the illustrative math language that would match then the use of priority standards. And so when we talk about those things, we're talking about the same thing. We're just using middle school used illustrative math language to communicate that in their plan. Again, we're focused on priority standards. We're focused on our PLC work and taking that to the next level by reviewing student data and using that student data to inform our instruction at both levels. Do you have any questions on math?
I've heard it mentioned several times priority standards. Where would we look to find what those priority standards are?
So we're at different phases of discussion in priority standards, but those priority standards have been identified through OSPI. So that is not a document that we're creating on our own. Those are already identified and are available on OSPI. That is information that we can get for you, and we probably should, having had that question, probably should post that to our website or something similar. We're at the beginning stages of this and working on these priority standards. So we're all at different stages. I should have said not beginning stages.
Scotty, Achieve the Core is also a very good website around standards and priority standards.
So I just will pipe in here. Achieve the Core went through the standards and knew that in this model of learning that the country's in, that there's no way that school districts could teach all of the standards in a particular grade level. So they went through and prioritized standards based on a few things. One, the standards that were really key for students to be successful in that grade and the next one. And then also some of the standards that maybe were just introductory standards in that grade and were maybe taught more in depth in the following year were deprioritized. But I can send you a link to that document.
Okay, I would just be interested to know what, and from parents, I'm sure they want to know what it is that their kids are expected to meet. So I like we're using the word priority standards, but I'm not sure where we find that to match up to what we're teaching.
And I just want to jump
So
back
if you
in.
could-
We are, all of the standards are important and our teachers are trying to teach all of the standards, but putting more of an emphasis on those priority standards. And roughly, we're talking about a quarter to a third of the standards would fall in the priority standard list. That doesn't mean that we're only teaching a quarter to a third. That means that the focus would be on that section.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Brian on the math goals from the board? All right, what's next?
Keep going, Deidre.
Okay, I'm back. It was the one you just passed there, Deidre. Yep, the English learners. Yep. So we've created goals around our English language learners for this year as well. One of the changes is we set an actual percent for the goal. You'll see on there it says English learners will grow 1 level in 2 of the 4 domains. And we've actually set that 80% of our English language learners will grow 1 level in 2 of the 4 domains, and that's reading, writing, speaking, and listening. So we're looking for them to grow in 2 of those 4. Just kind of as an anecdotal story, you know, the students have to reach a proficiency level in all of the areas. And what we'll find is at the middle school, and we're looking through those, and I'm sure it's at the other levels as well, you know, they may be at the highest level of proficiency in 2 or 3 of the 4, but they've got one area. So we're really looking at the middle level, and I'm sure at all other areas as well, other grade levels as well, at trying to tailor to those students and their needs, whether it be reading, writing, listening, or speaking. So last year we had 5 classes at the middle school for our English language learners, and we're using Avid Excel. We're using Avid Excel this year as well, but we did bring on a new curriculum this year, EL Achieve, and so it's targeting our students who are new to English and picking up all those English language components. And so at the middle school, that is something that we have a class for, 1 class for our 6th, 1 class for our 7th, and 1 class for our 8th graders. And then students that maybe have a little bit different need for their language, we still are using the Avid Excel curriculum that we talked about last spring when we were looking at the Avid program. So we're really targeting, we have all of our students that qualify for bilingual program support services are receiving services in their class. And so really a little bit more of a target this year than last year, and last year was more of a target than the year before. Some of the data that when we look at it, the number of students that met that goal last year from the middle school, our 7th graders that are now our 8th graders, there's 15% of our students that showed growth in 2 of the 4 domains. The 8th graders that are now 9th graders, that jumps to 49%. So we're going back looking at the program, seeing what the cause for that was. And then we looked ahead, and the students that were at the high school that were 10th grade up to 11th grade had an even higher percentage of students that were meeting that goal last year as well. So we've got a lot of strengths in the program, but we're continuing to develop that program, the ELL program with EL Achieve. The admin at the middle school and high school just finished a half-day training, one of a multi-part training on our end as administrators, how to support that. Our teachers at both of the buildings have received professional development on that. So it's exciting to watch those programs take off and really get implemented. In addition, as Mr. Gilman talked about a little bit ago, the work with Jennifer Calgill. Dr. Calgill has been working with us. We started that work last year, and it was a 2-part professional development last year, just before and after kind of that January timeframe. And we finished the first round, and I believe the week that we closed schools down across the country was where we're going to start our second level of that. So we had already started working on content-specific language and vocabulary. And then this year, we kind of picked it up at a different level, and we're working with the high school. So we have every other week, we have an hour professional development that Eric has worked with, or Mr. Lorez has worked with Dr. Calgill to set up. And so both of our staff are receiving that professional development every other week on Friday afternoons, and it's well attended. And we're working on those same things that Kevin talked about. I wish I would have been able to have just jumped off of Kevin's and said, you know, we're working on a lot of those same things, the vocabulary, the different levels, and when we look at our Iready scores, just as Kevin was talking about earlier, it's vocabulary and comprehension, and we're seeing the comprehension scores in informational text is where you're going to see those higher level vocabulary words, and that's where our students struggle more. So really trying to cross that bridge in all content areas, provide vocabulary. The one thing that I do want to jump in real quick, and I'm trying to be mindful of the time, is that the vocabulary doesn't just address, and it isn't just for our English learners. This is for all of our students. When we look at all of our students, developing the vocabulary and the knowledge for all of our students to increase all of their comprehension is important. So the work we're doing, while it's you know, the goal is here under English learners, and that's where our goal will be monitored around and checked up on. It really benefits every one of our students in our buildings. So you know, that's kind of a great part, is it generalizes very well to all of our students.
I have a question for you, Michael, and maybe some of the other principals can help answer it.
Sure.
Brian alluded to it, the Iready test, or the Iready assessments. How representative are those of the Smarter Balance assessment? And if they aren't, like I think what you were saying, Brian, what test are we using to do the assessments with that is more in line with the SBA?
So I'll let the others talk here in a sec, but I'll just get my 2 cents in.
Okay.
The Iready assessment is an adaptive assessment. So if a student misses one at a certain level, it might drop back, and it kind of finds that happy place where they're able to find a certain level of success. Ceilings and basals is what they're looking for. And then based off of that, it gives you a score. Whereas maybe the interim blocks it doesn't adjust by grade level. It looks at the standards that are being taught at that specific unit level or at that grade level, and it gives you a reflection directly back on that grade level, or those specific goals are more targeted. And so for us, you know, we might get something that says a student is in 7th grade, but they're working at a 3rd grade level, and areas where they can improve. Whereas the Smarter Balanced interim blocks are more focused, and those are, and it's the same, comes from the same bank of ideas and assessments that the Smarter Balanced comprehensive comes from. But it allows us to look at those specific standards and really focus on those standards versus all at one time. So that, for us, that's what we liked, is the ability to look at those standards that we're going to be working on and get a pre and a post, if you will, for those specific standards, and really target that work.
So the interim blocks is the replacement then for Iready.
That's what we're looking to be more specific about, is using the interim blocks, because you can really break it almost down to the unit level. And so for us, we're able to go into a unit and give a smarter, or the interim blocks, and then look at them after as almost a pre and a post to show growth on those specific standards.
I can speak to, Scotty, to Iready. Iready is our one assessment that is used across really K-10, but we also use it for some 11th graders. And being a title and LAP district, we're required to use a measure to report growth. And we could, there's different choices. They're not, the Iready test isn't the only one, but the Iready assessment is one that can be administered, and it does, like, if we want to know where a student, help us to see where a student might be, where grade level wise, if Michael gives a 7th grader a 7th grade assessment, but the student is performing at 5th grade, they're just not going to, they might not, I mean, we're not going to get a score maybe relevant to where that student's at. And that's what the Iready helps us with. It's our assessment we use to show growth for our LAP funding and our LAP reports, title reports, as well as the migrant reporting, some of the reporting we have to do.
And that's the one I was more familiar with. I've heard it for years with Scotty, him needing to take or taking an Iready test, but this newer one, the interim blocks is new. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on how we're doing the
Sure.
assessments.
And Scotty, a little bit addition to the Iready assessment is, like Michael said, it is adaptive, and so they'll get some higher questions and some lower questions until they give them a specific grade level. But it's also tied to a personalized instruction. So based on that diagnostic, it has a virtual instruction that the students can work through and get interventions based on that specific grade level. Another piece that we've just been introduced, or we're going to be introduced PD wise, is there's a standards mastery assessment that's tied to Iready, which gets into the specific grade level standards, and teachers will be able to assign those as formative assessments to see how kids are doing specifically on grade level standards. The interim blocks, though, are a very good assessment to judge how students are doing specifically on grade level standards. And elementary has used those in the past, not as a reporting purpose, but to see how kids are faring with those grade level standards, but they don't go in, the interim blocks are grades 3 and above. They don't go down to the primary level.
All right, thank you. Brian, are you
Yep.
are
I'm
you
still
next? Or
here.
are you waiting to talk? Okay.
Next slide.
Okay.
There you go.
Next slide. I would add my 2 cents to the previous discussion and tag on to what Kevin said, that the interim blocks have really been developed over the last year or two to include more specificity with what they're scoring. So we no longer have just the summative score, but we can narrow those down and focus those down to particular skills. And that's one of the areas that we like. Kevin referenced the interim blocks only going down to the 3rd grade level. And Iready really only has supplemental information or remedial information for our kids up to the 8th grade. And so for our students at the high school that are still working on their reading skills, it is still appropriate to use some of those programs, but the higher grade levels, it's no longer appropriate. And a lot of that is based not just on that information, but on the platform itself. The platform is geared toward the elementary and middle school, but even at the middle school level, it's a little bit at the low end for the middle school as far as the platform goes. So kids get on there and they see these cartoon figures and they disconnect from that. And the belief is that they don't put the time or the effort into that as much as the elementary kids might, based solely on the platform. And so there's a couple of different avenues there and trains of thought that have led to the interim blocks. So moving on to the rest of the high school pieces. I spoke to this one in our last meeting, but I referenced the 9th grade on track to graduate. Now, it is a little deceiving, the category itself. So this is something that also goes onto our report card. And you can see in 2018, we had a 64.6 on track to graduate. 2019, we raised that 3.2%. I referenced it, like I said last time. What 9th grade on track to graduate means is the students who did not fail a section in their freshman year. So if a freshman student fails any section, they are no longer, by the state's definition of on track to graduate, they are no longer on track to graduate. That does not mean that I'm switching to my language. That does not mean that they won't have the credits to graduate. That just means that according to the state's definition, they have failed a section. Because of our current grading systems and trimester systems, we have built in opportunity for kids to make up for some failures along the way. So students will still have the credits available, the credits in order to graduate. Again, according to the state, they just are no longer on track. So anything that is reported in our report card is something obviously that we want to improve upon. It reflects on the school. I pulled the numbers just for the first trimester, and we are currently at 67.3% on track to graduate for this year. That's not what we wanted, but that's on par for our percentages, moving, from last year to this year. You can see the goal is to get to 85% by 2025. And we feel like we're building that plan in order to do so. Now, this plan was started with the intent of being in a traditional setting. So the action items over on the right-hand side, creating the student success coordinator with Casey Blair and the help of Casey Blair and the help of all of our teachers in the daily advisory, working to create a system to identify students and categorize students. We have done that. We've created a 4-3-2-1 system to place students that are struggling at different levels, and then to build into the scope of that position and into the scope of the school day the helps that these students will need, such as we're looking at the possibility of what we're calling a freshman academy. Now, this is a possible future move. Freshman academy, students that are struggling as 8th graders could potentially get placed in a class, and all of this is dependent upon funding and dependent upon teacher numbers and that kind of thing. But to create a freshman academy where students can now take 4 core classes and 1 academy class where we teach them the skills that they will need to be successful at the high school. Not every student may need that class. So we have many successful students at the middle school, but there are some that we can already identify at the middle school level that we think will need a transition into the high school learning environment. And those are the kids that we would focus on putting into a freshman academy type. So as we look at this information, it seems to be an ever-changing position as we build it, but one that I feel and we feel will really help our 9th grade students to avoid that pitfall of failing even one section as they move into the high school. Are there any questions on that one?
Yes. Who's working on the Freshman Academy idea, Brian?
That is myself, David Funk, and Casey Blair, who is the student success coordinator. And we are at the beginning stages of that as well. I've spoken to Deanna as well about that position and what that would entail and what that means for us staffing wise, and making some difficult decisions on what teachers teach and pulling, what funds to use to fill a position like that. We know we can fill at least a couple periods a day with Casey Blair in that student success coordinator role. She is more than willing to teach that class. But that would only offer us a couple of sections, which is better than nothing, but we would like to look at funding, another teacher to be able to broaden that out and include other students in that as well.
But does this reach, we talked about this last year, this was a concern then too, how are we going to reach those 8th graders that need that support to be ready for high school? So with Brian and David and Casey, how are we reaching the middle school for their, because this seems to be coming from the middle school and being ready for high school as a 9th grader. How are we including what's happening at the middle school in that freshman academy discussion?
Yeah, that is one. When we talk about the vertical alignment, all of these pieces come into play. So Michael and I have been working hard to try and include that vertical piece. And that goes to, scheduling, taking counselors down to the middle, over to the middle school to inform them of the processes and registration processes, choosing classes. We're trying to refine that one as well. But this freshman academy concept is new enough that hasn't been taken to the middle school yet. We're just we're toying with the idea, and bottom line, we need to be able to fill a position like this first before we can even make it an offering. So we're at the very infant stages of this one. But you're exactly right. It does need to go to the 8th grade level, and it's one that I think we I know we want to take it to the middle school level as we get closer to informing students of what scheduling opportunities they have.
I would agree, because looking at those numbers, we're about 30% or so not making that
Right.
freshman on time goal.
Right.
So hopefully it'll move that direction. Any questions from the board for Brian on this topic? All right, thanks, sir. What's next?
I'm going to finish this out here for the high school. I've got two more here.
Okay.
The next one is Prosser High School, additional goals, dual credit course completion. Now this one goes directly into the work within our counseling department and our CTE, among other things. We have really made a push. I think you guys are aware of the push that we've made to get dual credit courses at the high school. We have dual credit coursework in every department at our school, including we're still looking at the CTE science offerings between human anatomy, physiology, and the health science courses. So we're still looking at that, but we have a number of new courses as of last year, and we're continuing to push some of those courses to try and get more availability to students in dual credit and give them the dual credit opportunities. But the goal there, you can see as we're progressing and maybe even doing a better job, trying to do a better job of rolling this out to the community as an awareness piece. In 2018, we had 15.4% of our students taking dual credit. Last year, jumped to 32% of our students taking dual credit. That I would anticipate that will jump again, given the number of dual credit courses that we are offering now in the high school this year. And with the generosity of our school district and board providing funds to pay for those courses last year and this year is another huge step to that, and in getting kids to take those courses. But the goal now to get to 2025 is 75% of our students to complete at least one dual credit course and earn college credit by 2025. And they have a lot of opportunity to do so from the time that they're freshmen to begin working on gaining that college credit. So we're excited about this one. This one is in direct correlation with Rick Follett and the work that he's doing in CTE and building that program. I feel very, very good about that program and the work that's going on there. So we're continuing to push this one into the future and into 21st century, if you will, and offering our students more opportunity.
And in particular, this program, our teachers are doing a great job of promoting it as well. I hear them talking in their classes to our kids about dual credit, and that's great. And it gets the kids excited because they know that they can move on to some college classes and have some stuff knocked out at the time they get there. So I really like this program. I'm glad we're doing it. So whoever's involved with it, thank you very much. And especially our teachers that are promoting it, thank them, because it is helping and it gets kids engaged and involved. I like it. Any questions from the board for Mr. Bailey on dual credit completion? All right, thank you. Deanna, is there anything else on the school improvement plans we need to know?
I've got one more, Mr.
Oh, you have another slide? Oh, I don't have that one. Mine says questions. All right, go ahead.
Apologize for that. The last one is graduation rate. That's a pretty self-explanatory title there. You can see the graduation rate in 18, 19, 81% up to 84%. I don't know why I didn't have the number there. Anyway, 90% of our students graduating on time as of 2025. That's the goal. Now the hope is that by building all of these programs and building, in the opportunity for I hate to say the opportunity for failure, but that's really what it is. It's to build that grit through the failure process, and that students can get back on track and have opportunities to grow through the process and still graduate on time. And I think that that's what we've done with the trimester system and our scheduling is to provide kids with the opportunity to, even though they may have had a somewhat unsuccessful freshman year, that they can regain those credits and rebuild and refocus and get to graduation. So 90% graduation rate as of 2025, though it seems like a big jump, it really is something that I feel is very attainable. And especially as we look into the practices on the right-hand side, but building in the process, starting with freshmen and teaching freshmen early on the process, the skills that they will need to be successful throughout. I think we're really it's gonna pay dividends at the end. And as we get more classes through this, we're gonna see a higher graduation rate. And to be able to then expand that, like we said, if we can get an additional personnel and find a way to include that, to expand that to not just freshmen, but to, all the students that may be struggling, any student that may be struggling, and provide them with a class dedicated to teaching those skills, whether they're a freshman or a senior. And then the daily advisory to give them that adult interaction, adult point person that they can go to and speak with if they're struggling. All of these things, I really do feel like we are moving quickly toward the 90% graduation rate.
Any questions from the board on graduation rate for Brian? All right, thank you, sir.
Yeah, Scotty. Scotty, I don't have a question. I don't have a question. What I do have is I would like to congratulate him on the dual credit. He doubled the percentage of the kids taking it, and a 3.5% jump in 1 year in graduation rate. That's pretty solid.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. And really, Scotty said it best. We do have a great group of teachers at the high school, and our staff is amazing. They're doing everything they can to help these kids. And, it's fun to watch. It's good to see the relationships that they're building with kids across the district, all of our teachers at every level. And I have a student at every building. With my 5 kids, I have one at every building. I can say without a doubt that all of our teachers are bending over backwards for our kids, and it's really commendable and good to see. So thank you.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you, Brian. Deanna, can you kind of wrap up anything that we need to know about the school improvement plans? It's on the agenda for us to approve later.
It is on the agenda for you to approve later. As you know, the plans are really long, big documents that you've received. If you have any questions or anything about those in the future, our plan is to come back because a lot of the assessments aren't completed till the end of the year. We'll give you, next year, our plan will be to in the fall. We're going to tell you the progress that we made or didn't make on any of these goals, and we'll continue that process over the goals for the next 5 years.
Perfect. Any questions for Deanna on the school improvement plans before we move on? Awesome. Great work. Thank you very much, Deanna. All right, so that takes us down through our reports. Our next report is the safety and security report. Mr. Thompson.
I'm trying to get it going there.
All right.
First off, I want to thank Deidre for getting me included in your guys' board packets, and I apologize for the length of the report. I hope it didn't crash anybody's computers. Currently, the team is working on seven projects. The first being the emergency response plan and policy that we've completed. The district does not have a current emergency response plan. We need to get this before the established safety and security committee so they can review it, so that they can make their recommendations to the board for approval and implementation. We've also gone through and created a district-wide emergency procedures handbook to replace the 7 or 8 different versions that are floating out there in the district. That again needs to go before the safety and security committee to get to you guys at the board. Rapid responder. Each one of the security officers has been officially trained from WASPIC on the rapid responder easy alert program. our recommendation is we need to dive into this program. It's free and can be used not only district wide, but if we get Prosser PD, the sheriff's office, and the fire department on board as well, we're just basically an application on a smartphone away from dealing with an emergency quickly. Been working on the COPS grant program. Craig and I have been working diligently on this since September, and it is problematic at best. The Department of the Justice has transferred the program from one carrier to another carrier to administer the grants, and they have extreme technical problems with their computer technical issues. I wish I could send Sean over there and straighten them out, but that's probably not going to happen. They assure us that they're not going to reject or cancel the grant on us, even though we have not been able to officially accept the grant. The Superintendent Ellis and I have worked on a substitute security officer program to augment the security team and taking over the construction security up at the new high school with all the vandalism. We've been working with Shervinell to reduce the amount of vandalism and thefts over the time frame. We've the current security team has worked almost 400 hours up there at the new high school, and we haven't had any incidents so far. So obviously that extra security works. The development of the security substitute security team would strictly be just to work construction at this point, and then eventually we could actually use them because they'd be trained and certified just as like we are. Should a regular school security officer have the need to take a day off for illness or training or personal reasons. The safety security meeting committee, we definitely need to get that going. That's my recommendation. We need to get that reactivated, whether that be through Zoom. It would probably have to be through Zoom. And then the team has been involved in several different activities. All on top of doing our building security functions, the security officers have been tasked with by their administration to do other types of duties within the confines of their buildings. One of those items is a kind of a student re-engagement program. And I want to give the kudos here where they belong. The Heights management team developed a program to reach out to these struggling students that are not engaging in the distance learning process. So using their model, the security team would like to develop a program to where utilizing these security officers, they could go out on home visits with counselors or administrators, assistant office managers or whatever, to see if we can get these kids to get involved and re-engage. In fact, we made a contact with 3 kids today that hadn't been engaged at all, and we got them to engage today. So I want to make the kudos to my guys there. Security team training, we've really maintained our qualifications and our trainings, training consistently with Prosser PD for emergency response. As I said before, all the guys are working the construction security, and that is just it's just additional hours. And then on top of that, every one of our guys has been involved in the meal delivery program on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings since its inception. So guys have been really working hard. So I'll accept any questions if the board has any.
I'd like to start. I don't really have any questions, but you guys weren't hired by accident, and the work that you're doing is awesome. Beyond your security function, you've reached out. Just hearing that you engaged kids today, that's awesome, Glenn. That you guys are able to do that. You all have a background that can help reach a kiddo that might just need that little pep talk, that you can do it, buddy. And you guys have all been there. So I appreciate that. The things that you mentioned, that you needed the Safety and Security Committee back together for, whenever you need that done, just let me know, let Matt know, and we can make that happen. We can do it on Zoom. Meeting in person is going to be challenging for the board for a little while because we're restricted by the Public Meetings Act, but we can take care of getting stuff approved that you need done if you tell us what it is. And there's a few on here I think we could knock out pretty quick for you. Okay. The model that you're using, I'm sorry, meal delivery, that's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. And I know that isn't your job. You guys were hired for security, but reaching out and helping those kids and those families and the staff that are trying to get that work done, thank you so much. All of you are doing a great job. Any questions or comments from the board for Glenn?
Yeah, Mr. Thompson, this is Scott. Yeah, I kind of wanted to echo Scotty's thoughts there. I think this is exactly what we thought as a board when we came up with the idea. I mean, it's gone above and beyond, but I think these are the hopes that we all had, that not only would you guys be securing and making sure the kids are safe, but be mentors and an ear for these kids, and also an ear for the administration. When you hear something, we can be proactive and get out in front of something. And you guys hear way more than anybody does. I know just from talking to some of your staff, you guys hear a lot of things that you pass along, whether or not it happens or not. Did
we lose Scott?
I think he froze. I think his system froze.
I think so too. Maybe he'll come back to us. Any other comments or questions from the board for Mr. Thompson? All right. I'm sorry we lost you there, Scott. If you get back on, we'll chime you back in there. Glenn, thank you very much for your work. Let Matt know what you need us to do from the board and we'll get that done for you.
No problem. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, sir. All right. Next are board reports. We'll put Scott at the bottom. Let's start with Jess. Jeslyn, are you there? All right, Andy.
No, I'm good, Scotty.
Okay. Peggy?
I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
All right. Jess or Scott, are you back? Okay. Well, we'll move on. Let's, our student reps. Emma, I think I saw you sign on earlier. Are you there?
I don't know if she's going to be here. She just texted and said she had to she got called into work again last minute to fill in for a
All right. I thought I saw her earlier. Maybe that was Jennifer. Go ahead, Kate. You're there.
Yeah. So I don't really have much to report on. We started trimester 2 this week, obviously. So that was actually kind of a transition, I think, for students and teachers alike. The attendance policy change actually was pretty, I don't know, it kind of changed the mindset. I don't it sounds kind of weird, but it made school feel a little more mandatory in a way, because attendance in live meetings is so much more important now. And I think that's going to be a little difficult for some students who have treated school more like an option. And anyway, but I just something I noticed in students. So this week we at the high school, it was Merry Mustang Week, so we tried our best to pull off some kind of holiday spirit activities with the student body. Involvement is still not what we'd like it to be, but we were able to do some service for some of the citizens, the residents at the senior living homes. So that was really good. And we've developed a really good system of doing pickups and drop-offs at the main office at the high school. And the office staff there has been really, really helpful. So those are becoming really frequent. But yeah, I didn't really have anything else other than the constant adults and peers asking for updates on hybrid models or returning back to school, and just reiterating the importance of getting the little ones back to school. Seems to be a common theme of what I'm hearing. And I think I'd agree with that as well. As a high schooler, I still see the importance of getting the little kids back to school. But yeah, that was really all I had for you.
Thank you, Kate. Jennifer, are you with us?
Scotty, she reached out in the middle of the meeting as was having some technical difficulty. So may not be able to get online, and she sends her apologies.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Superintendent's report, Mr. Ellis.
Hey, so I just wanted to kind of, to start my report, talk a little bit about our security officers. And when we first made the decision to hire security officers at each building, there was a discussion about whether we wanted to invest that money in facilities and a single point of entry at different buildings, or hire personnel. And I believe that the board made the right decision, and I believe that our security officers have really showed their value since they've been hired. They've improved our system immensely, and they continue to do so. With this, I also want to talk about the city of Prosser recently made a decision to eliminate the school resource officer, the cop on campus that we normally had. And so now we're really reliant upon our security officers to do that work. And so I'm really thankful that we got the right people there. I believe that we hired the right people, and they're leaders within their building. So Glenn, we just really appreciate your work as the lead security officer. I have a checklist here about what I want to go over. So the first piece was that I pulled the board and kind of asked the board for some guidance. We had a geotechnical survey at Riverview, and they found out that the old Keene Riverview had been demoed and buried. And so they were looking at building a bus loop and a parking lot over the top of it. To excavate it, it was around $200,000. And so after communicating with each of the board members, kind of the overall opinion was that that money was better spent on the building versus excavating the parking lot or excavating old Keene Riverview. And prior to laying the asphalt for the parking lot and the bus loop. And so that was a decision that we passed on to Dan Purfoy of Construction Services Group. Financially, Craig talked about the acreage, and we continue to work on that and getting an assessment. We're continuing to work also with Patterson and fulfilling their obligation about contributing to the bond for Prosser High School. They have some ideas about utilizing their PILT funds or their payment in lieu of taxes, and working with Prosser School District on giving that money to them once we decide on construction projects. And so we're continuing to work with Monica at Patterson School District on that. With finances, I brought it up last meeting, I'll bring it up this meeting again. We're going to need to be mindful of our finances. Of course, when we approved this budget, it wasn't really where the board had wanted it, and we had to go back to the drawing board or go back to the drafting table and rework that budget. So we're not out of the woods with that. We've absorbed a lot of personnel, and you know, we've been able to hang on because we've been in virtual learning. So there is a possibility that we will need to hire those people back. So just being mindful of the budget and to try and make early decisions so we can communicate that with our staff members if we do need to reduce in force. I will now talk about hybrid learning. So today, Governor Inslee had a 2:30 address where he talked about a number of different things, but he talked about schools returning. And so there was a little bit of a mixed message there. I know that many of you had the opportunity to tune in. He advocated that schools return, but he also gave metrics that were very, very distant from our current situation. So some of the metrics that he was talking about were 50 cases per 100,000 or 350 cases per 100,000. Of course, in Benton County, we're at over 700 cases per 100,000. And so he was talking about schools transitioning into a hybrid model. We're continuing to have those discussions, and we're starting to transition. Of course, we have athletics going. We've had some positive COVID cases there. We do have tutoring services, and we're looking at, our principals are actually reworking their master schedules. We're looking at an AABB model, which would be students attending school. The A group would attend school Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday would be a deep clean day. And then the B group would attend Thursday, Friday. We had a meeting today with the school nurses, as well as food services, transportation, maintenance, the maintenance and custodial department, just about logistics about that. Of course, we have a big PPE order that we place through the ESD. That will be coming in, but we're continuing to work on that. Kevin Lusk has done a fantastic job with doing contact tracing and getting our kids active. We knew that we were going to encounter cases when we started that, and that's been true. We have encountered cases, and kids have had to isolate or quarantine themselves. We have layers and layers of, you know, kind of mitigating actions that we're taking, from people wearing PPE to contact tracing to attestations, and we're continuing to try and refine those. So once our principals rework their master schedules and come up with those, we'll be submitting those to the board so that we can take a look. And then the last piece on that will be our communication out to the parents and to solidify a date and to come back to school. We're still working on MOUs at the principal level, at the teacher level, at the PSE level, about what that looks like for employees. So even though we have a lot of the big cornerstones put in place, there's still a lot of fine tuning that has to take place. So any questions on any of that information that I can help shed some light on?
Any questions from the board for Mr. Ellis? Andy, Peggy, Jess, Scott? All right, thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to our consent agenda and a couple action items. I need to see how many board members we have on the call, because we lost some. It sounds like internet went down in town for a little bit and we lost a few folks. Peggy, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
All
right.
Andy, are you okay? You can just leave your mic on. We're going to vote real quick. Andy, you're there. That's you. Jess,
Yes.
Are you with us?
Sure.
Yes, I am here.
Okay. And Scott, are you with us? All right, sounds like we're missing Scott. So we've got myself, Peggy, Andy, and Jess. All right, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. It's in your packet and you've had a chance to review it. Just need a motion to approve it, please.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion by Andy and second by Jess to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right, motion passes. Our next item on the agenda is our action items. Our first action item is the approval of the school improvement plans and the school-wide plans for Keene Riverview, Prosser Heights Elementary School, Whitstrand Elementary School, Housel Middle School, and Prosser High School. We received a presentation on those tonight, and they were included in your board packet to review. Just need a motion to approve the school improvement plans and the school-wide plans for the Prosser School District.
I'll make a motion to approve the school-wide plans and the school improvement plans as presented, and they did a great job. Thank you.
I'll
I will
second.
second it.
She beat you by a second, Andy. Motion by
You can have
Peggy
it.
and seconded by Jess to approve the school improvement plans for the Prosser School District. Any discussion?
I didn't get to
Hearing
say
none,
my
all in
report.
favor,
Can I
signify-
wait? Can I just
Oh,
say that I really
yeah.
appreciated the collaboration on those and seeing the vertical and horizontal work that went into them. I think this has been just a huge improvement on, like all the principals were saying, their ability to collaborate, and it really showed in the reports or in the plans, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Any other discussion on the school improvement plans? Excuse me. Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, next is approval of the bargaining agreement for the positions of assistant superintendent. Presented in your board packet were the negotiations for ongoing, or for the agreement between the district and the assistant superintendents, setting their salaries for 2019 and 2020 at 4%, 2020 and 2021 at 4%, and for 2021 and 2022 at 2%. Need a motion to approve those salary positions for the assistant superintendents, please.
I'll approve. I make a motion to approve, to approve the salaries.
Motion by Peggy, a second,
I'll
please.
second. I'll
Any
second.
discussion? Thank you, Jess. Hearing no discussion, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Scotty, I'm back on. Where are we at?
Yes, Scott, we're in the middle of voting on the approval of the bargaining agreement for the assistant superintendents. We have voted and I'm taking the votes for opposed right now.
Opposed.
Okay. So the motion passes. Mr. Coleman votes no. Our third item is the approval of vouchers for accounts payable as presented. It's a construction payment for Fowler Construction, $704,890.32. Need a motion to approve, please.
Move to approve the
I'll make
vouchers.
a motion. I'll second it.
Andy and Scott. All right. Motion by Andy and seconded by Scott to approve the vouchers as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Excuse me, any opposed? Motion passes. All right. I think that takes us to the end of our agenda. I don't know if Darlene's here with us. Could someone tell us about the Whitstrand, the Whitstrand Second Harvest food? Matt, do you have information, or Deanna? or Craig? I just have a flyer.
No, just that they're continuing to meet the food needs of our families. And so this is an ongoing event, and we've reached out for volunteers, and we continue to try and provide our families with the resources. Kevin, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the next one's going to be on Tuesday, January 5th at Whitstrand. And
Darlene said they were able to serve all the families that came. They did have about 10 boxes left over. And then also there was some hand cleaning some soap products that I guess Dave shared that we couldn't use, but could be used in homes. And so those were shared as well.
Awesome, great work. Okay.
And
I saw that it's on our, go ahead.
I just wanted to say there's still a great need. We had several families that continued to come through the line, even though the food was all gone at that point throughout the day, checking in at the door, asking us if there was any food left. So I just want to thank Darlene for organizing all this for the families that are out there. And I know that Second Harvest also is planning on doing it at least once a month. So thank you.
Yep.
Great.
And
I saw that it
I'd
is
like to
posted
add,
on the district website.
yeah. I'd like to add, Scotty,
Peggy.
that I have had a couple of the families that live out here in the Whitstrand area talk to me and tell me how much they appreciate that they're being helped. And between the school and Second Harvest, there's a huge need in the community. So I'm wanted to pass that along. They really do appreciate what is happening for them.
Awesome, thank you. Craig, if you can be sure to pass on to Darlene, if there's any help that we can do to help support that project, please let us know. We want to help. The next item is thank you, sir. Our next item is just the future meetings. The board's going to have a special meeting on Wednesday, the 23rd at 1 o'clock here on Zoom, just to approve some vouchers. It's open to the public if you'd like to attend, to take about 5 minutes. And then the next regular board meeting will be held on Wednesday, January 13th here on Zoom at 7 o'clock. And we'll make sure to get the agenda out to the public for that meeting. If there's nothing else, we can adjourn.
I'll make a motion to
All right.
adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Peggy.
Yep.
Andy, it looks
I
like
will
you were
second
saying
it.
second. All right. Y'all have a good night. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks everybody for
Thanks,
joining.
Scotty.
Thank you, everybody.
Night.
Good night. Thanks. Thanks, Deidre.
No problem.